grand ballroom of Lancaster Tower shimmered with golden light, filled with New York's elite. Celeste Monroe had once belonged here, standing proudly beside her husband, Adrian Lancaster, the powerful CEO of Lancaster Holdings. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of their 5-year anniversary. Instead, it became the night that destroyed her life. Celeste stood frozen in the center of the room, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. Adrian lifted his wine glass, his smile razor-sharp as he spoke. "I have built my career on seeing through deception. How ironic that I failed to see the traitor in my own home." A hush fell over the crowd. Celeste's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't understand. The giant screen flickered to life, displaying confidential medical records, proof that Adrian had been sterile since birth. A murmur of shock rippled through the room. "And yet," Adrian continued, voice dripping with cold amusement, "my wife is pregnant with twins." The room spun. Celeste felt her knees weaken. "No, this is a mistake." "Adrian, you know I would never betray you," she pleaded, but her voice barely reached him over the whispers filling the room. Adrian's smirk deepened. "Really? Then perhaps Marcus Wren should explain. After all, you've been quite close to him lately." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Celeste's breath hitched. Marcus Wren, the man Adrian loathed, his biggest competitor, was here tonight. "She's lying." Marcus shot up from his seat, furious, but Adrian wasn't listening. With a flick of his wrist, 2 guards stepped forward, their grip on Celeste firm and unyielding. "Remove her." "Adrian, no, I am carrying your children." Celeste struggled, but the hands on her arms were unforgiving. Within seconds, she was dragged through the entrance and thrown onto the cold pavement outside. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen. She gasped, looking down. Blood. Celeste raised her eyes to the towering glass building. Through the rain, she saw Adrian standing at the top floor window, Olivia Whitmore at his side, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. A single tear slipped down Celeste's cheek. She knew, in that moment, that her life as she knew it was over. "Someone help me," she whispered, before the darkness swallowed her whole. Celeste Monroe did not die. She was rushed to the hospital, her body battered, blood staining the stretcher as the ambulance sped through the stormy night. The doctors said she had lost too much blood. They weren't sure if she could carry the babies to term. But Celeste refused to lose anything else. She fought, and she won. Her twin boys, Leo and Elias, were born fragile, but alive. It was a miracle, but miracles came with a price. Celeste's body had weakened. Worse, she had nothing. No money, no home, no way to protect them. But she had one thing no one could ever take from her: hatred. Celeste vanished from Texas, taking her sons with her. With the help of Dr. Jack Carter, the man who had saved her life, and William Johnson, her former mentor in finance, she slowly rebuilt herself. But survival was never enough. She wanted justice. Celeste Monroe was dead. That woman had died on a cold, rainy night, betrayed by the man she once loved. Now she was Seraphina Vale. A new name, a new identity, a carefully orchestrated plan. For 6 years, Seraphina reinvented herself, rising from the shadows to become one of the most elusive financial powerhouses in New York. No one knew who she was. No one knew where she had come from. All they knew was that Vesper Capital was quickly becoming a force to be reckoned with. And now she was ready. Texas, the place where it all began. Vesper Capital had just secured its biggest deal yet, opening its headquarters directly across from Lancaster Holdings, a silent declaration of war. Seraphina stood on her balcony, wine glass in hand, staring at the towering Lancaster building. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. She had waited 6 years for this moment. The first step of her revenge, letting Adrian Lancaster know that Celeste Monroe had never truly disappeared. The gala, the first encounter, the grand ballroom of the Monarch Hotel shimmered under crystal chandeliers. The clinking of glasses, murmurs of power, and laughter of the elite filled the space. And into this world of luxury, Seraphina Vale walked in. She wore a sleek black silk gown, moving with effortless grace. No one recognized her. No one except Adrian Lancaster. The moment he saw her, the world around them seemed to slow. She saw the shock in his eyes, the disbelief, the confusion, and for the first time, a flicker of fear. She had once been his wife, gentle and trusting, but the woman standing before him now, cold, mysterious, dangerous. Seraphina raised her glass, lips curling into a knowing smile. "Good evening, Mr. Lancaster." Adrian blinked, as if trying to confirm that she was real. "Celeste?" She tilted her head, amusement flickering in her gaze. "I believe you're mistaken. It's Seraphina Vale now." And then she walked away, leaving Adrian Lancaster standing amidst the wreckage of his past. The game had begun. Adrian Lancaster couldn't take his eyes off the woman who had just walked back into his life. Seraphina Vale, no Celeste Monroe. The name had changed, but he still knew her. Yet this wasn't the woman he had discarded 6 years ago. That woman had loved him, had feared his cold gaze. But Seraphina? She stood before him like a storm, controlled, precise, and devastating. A storm that wasn't here to beg, it was here to destroy. After the gala, Adrian began his search. He wanted the truth. But there was a problem. Every trace of Celeste Monroe had been erased. Hospital records? Gone. Bank accounts? Wiped. Financial history? Non-existent. Every lead he found disappeared just as quickly, as if someone had carefully orchestrated his failure. And then he found them. Leo and Elias. Twin boys, 6 years old, dark hair, piercing eyes, faces far too similar to his own to be a coincidence. The doubt that had plagued him for days evaporated, replaced by a chilling certainty. He had been lied to. Celeste had never betrayed him. She had been carrying his children all along. Rage coiled in his chest, but before he could fully process the betrayal, another crisis hit. Lancaster Holdings was crumbling. A mysterious investment firm, Vesper Capital, had quietly bought out all of Lancaster's key suppliers. His biggest project, the Sterling District, was now indefinitely delayed due to supply shortages. Shareholders were losing faith. Stocks were plummeting. And when Adrian dug deeper, he wasn't surprised to find the name Seraphina Vale behind it all. Reality struck him like a punch to the gut. Celeste hadn't just come back. She had come back to destroy him. The confrontation, the hunter becomes the prey. Adrian didn't wait any longer. He stormed into Vesper Capital's headquarters, where Seraphina sat behind a glass desk, sipping red wine, utterly unbothered. "This was all you." Seraphina arched a brow, taking another sip. "You'll have to be more specific." "Lancaster Holdings, the suppliers, the attacks. You spent 6 years planning my downfall." "You're sharp, Adrian, but you're wrong." She set her glass down and rose from her seat, eyes gleaming. "I'm not destroying your company. I'm taking back what you owe me." Adrian clenched his fists. "And the twins? They're mine, aren't they?" Seraphina's smile was razor sharp. "What right do you have to ask that question?" "I am their father." "Father?" She laughed, a sound as sharp as broken glass. 6 years ago, you threw me away like I was nothing. You stood there, watching as I bled, as I begged. And now, after all these years, you dare to come back? What, Adrian? Are you here to dig through the ruins of the life you destroyed?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "Celeste?" "Seraphina," she cut him off, cold as ice. "Celeste Monroe died the night you threw her out." She took a step forward, voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I didn't come back to beg, Adrian. I came back to take everything you stole from me." "And Adrian?" Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "I'm just getting started." Adrian Lancaster never thought he could be this wrong. When he discovered Leo and Elias, when he saw how much they resembled him, doubt began to fester. Seraphina remained silent, never confirming, never denying. But Adrian couldn't let it go. If she wouldn't tell him the truth, then evidence would. One afternoon, as Leo and Elias left school, Adrian waited in the crowd. He didn't approach them, didn't speak. He just needed a single strand of hair. 3 days later, when the DNA results arrived, Adrian couldn't breathe. They were his sons. There was no mistake. The truth didn't just crush him, it shattered him. Every memory, every cruel word, every choice he had made 6 years ago came crashing down on him like an avalanche. He had been wrong, so terribly, unforgivably wrong. He had thrown Celeste away because of a lie, but who had orchestrated it? For the first time in 6 years, Adrian asked himself, what if Celeste had never betrayed me? He retraced old files, medical records, and realized everything had been falsified. Someone had manipulated him. Someone had made him believe he could never have children. And when Adrian followed the trail, the pieces began falling into place. Every falsified document, every lie whispered in his ear, every doubt planted in his mind, they all led back to one name, Olivia Whitmore. And just like that, the anger that had been simmering inside him for days erupted into something darker. He had been used, and now someone was going to pay. Olivia Whitmore wasn't just the COO of Lancaster Holdings. She had always been the one pulling the strings. She had orchestrated everything. She had faked the test results, planted doubt in his mind, made him turn against Celeste. And for 6 years, she had stood beside him, taking the place that once belonged to Celeste, making herself the only woman he could trust. But Adrian no longer trusted anyone. The first thing he did after confirming the truth was confront Seraphina. She stood before him, composed, unreadable, as if she had expected this all along. "You knew, didn't you?" Adrian asked, his voice hoarse. "Knew what?" She tilted her head. "Olivia lied to me." Seraphina chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "And it took you 6 years to figure that out?" Adrian met her gaze. "They're mine. I want to be their father." Seraphina cut him off, her voice sharp. "You're too late, Adrian. 6 years ago, you chose to believe Olivia. You chose the lie. And now, you think a DNA test will fix everything?" Adrian clenched his fists, but this time, the anger wasn't directed at her. It was at himself. He had been manipulated. He had lost his family. And now, when he finally saw the truth, he didn't know if he could ever get them back. But Olivia knew. She sensed the shift in Adrian, saw the way he pulled away. And she understood one thing. If Adrian was no longer on her side, if Seraphina had returned stronger than ever, then the children were the key. Leo and Elias, they weren't just Adrian's future. They were Olivia's greatest threat, and she would not let them survive. The real war was just beginning. Olivia Whitmore was never one to accept defeat. She had clawed her way to the top, a position that should have belonged to Celeste Monroe if she hadn't intervened first. But now everything she built was crumbling. Adrian had turned against her. Seraphina had returned. And those 2 children were the greatest threat to her future. So there was only one option left. They had to disappear. The final plan. Seraphina felt something was wrong the moment she stepped into the boardroom. Adrian had texted her, urgent. When she arrived, he was standing there, pale, fists clenched around his phone. "They're missing." 2 words, enough to stop her heart. "Leo, Elias." The nanny said they never came home. Her vision blurred, but she couldn't afford to fall apart now. "Olivia," she spat the name. Adrian met her gaze, and for the first time in their lives, they were on the same side. "We'll find them," he said. "No, we'll take them back." The trail led them to an abandoned facility, a former Nightshade genomics lab. Seraphina and Adrian entered, weapons drawn, but Olivia was already waiting. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by monitors displaying security footage. Leo and Elias sat tied to chairs, eerily calm. "My babies!" Seraphina lunged forward, but Olivier raised a hand. "Careful, Seraphina. I didn't come this far to lose because of one reckless mistake." Adrian stepped forward, his voice deadly. "Let them go." Olivia smirked. "Oh, Adrian, after everything I did for you, I protected you from yourself for 6 years, and this is how you repay me?" Seraphina gripped her gun. "They are not part of this. Let them go." Olivia tilted her head, eyes sharp as a blade. "Aren't they? Because, if I recall, all of this started because of them." "No," Seraphina met her gaze. "It started because of you." The doors burst open. Security flooded the room. Olivia didn't resist. She knew the game was over. But as they cuffed her, she turned to Seraphina with an icy smile. "You thought revenge would set you free, but now you're just as trapped as he is." Seraphina met her stare, her voice steady. "This isn't revenge, Olivia. This is justice." And then, Olivia Whitmore was gone, forever. Leo and Elias were freed. They didn't cry, didn't panic, just looked at their mother, then at Adrian. "Can we go home now?" Elias asked. Seraphina looked at Adrian. She hadn't decided if he had a place in their lives yet. But today, they had fought together to protect their children. Today, they had stood on the same side. And maybe that was a beginning. It should have ended. Olivia Whitmore was gone, her crimes laid bare, Lancaster Holdings was free from her grasp, but the damage she had inflicted remained. And Seraphina Vale, she had everything she wanted. So why did she still feel so empty? In the weeks that followed, Lancaster Holdings underwent a complete restructuring. Adrian, though still CEO, had willingly stepped back from certain positions of power. Seraphina was no longer his greatest enemy, but she was also no longer the woman he once loved. They had both become too different. Still, he couldn't walk away from his sons. Leo and Elias accepted him, not with warmth, not with excitement, but with observation. They didn't call him father easily. They watched him, assessed him, and Adrian knew he had to prove himself. One afternoon, Seraphina sat by the water in her estate. Leo and Elias played chess on the veranda while Adrian stood a few feet away, watching her. At last he spoke. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Seraphina didn't turn. She simply said, "New York is still my home. And the boys? You can see them whenever you want." Adrian was silent. Then he exhaled slowly. "I once thought that when I learned the truth, we could start over." Seraphina let out a quiet laugh. "We can't undo the past, Adrian. You know that." "I do," he admitted, "but I still hoped." For the first time she met his gaze. And for just a moment, she saw the man he had once been, the man who had loved her above all else. But they were not those people anymore. "What we had died 6 years ago," she said softly, "we can't change that. But at the very least, we can raise our children together." Adrian nodded. No protest, no argument, just acceptance. "Then let's start there." 1 week later, Seraphina and her sons left Texas for New York, not to run, but to start anew. Adrian didn't stop her. Instead, 6 months later, he showed up at her office in New York, not as an enemy, not as a former lover, but as a business partner. "Maybe we can work together," he suggested. Seraphina considered him for a long moment, then gave a slow, knowing smile. Maybe. Their war was over, but their story wasn't quite finished yet. 3 years later, in an opulent hotel in Paris, 2 boys sat at a chessboard in a private dining room. Leo and Elias were no longer children. They had changed. "Your move," Elias said, his gaze locked onto the board. Leo thought for a moment, then advanced his first pawn. A few tables away, Seraphina and Adrian watched them. They were no longer enemies. Nor were they lovers trying to mend the past. They were allies. 2 people who had hurt each other beyond repair, yet remained bound by an unbreakable connection. They're 2 brilliant sons. "They're going to change the world," Adrian murmured, pride evident in his voice. Seraphina sipped her wine, not disagreeing. "The question is," she said slowly, watching the game unfold, "is the world ready for them? Across the room, Leo and Elias smiled.